Hello, and thank you very much for coming along. Today we're going to look again at the problem of global climate change in Africa, and this time we're going to focus on the problem of the rising sea. Africa is completely surrounded by the sea, and there are several ways in which sea level change is going to impact the continent. We'll look at a few of those today. We need to consider this from the vantage point of long-term history. Fortunately, we have maps that date back several hundred years of the coastlines of Africa, and several of them together can be pieced together from their different origins and then placed on a Google substrate from Google Earth to see what they're referring to. This is a very powerful way to immobilize information from the past to help us guide the future. And we're going to have to face some serious problems in the future because Lagos, like other coastal cities, is threatened by the forecast of sea level rise on a major scale, as we'll see in a minute. This is something that's not going to go away. It's something that we should have been aware of, in a sense, from the previous maps. But we're just beginning to realize how important those maps were for understanding what's going on. Let's take a look then at some of the historical maps and the ways in which they can inform us about whole regions, not just individual ports of call, but whole regions that are vulnerable to any change in sea level, as people observed hundreds of years ago on these maps. In fact, the whole of West Africa has as its capital cities, in most cases, cities that were put in place as a result of trading activity from the slave trade period onwards. So these slave trade maps are actually very crucial to understanding what's going on. We're going to look at African history and the Annales School. The Annales School was famous for studying history in long-range terms, what the French call l'histoire de la longue durée. So we're going to look at l'histoire de la longue durée along the African coast and assess the fate and future of a marginalized continent. We'll have to discuss, of course, what the Annales School is and where it came from and what it did, at least briefly as a background. And further, we'll look at the concept of l'histoire de la longue durée. Over what period of time should we be focusing on the long duration? And what do we mean by marginalized continent? What's marginalized about Africa? It becomes more and more central to the world economy. So there's a very specific meaning that the demographers used to describe it as a marginalized continent. And we'll have to look at that. You can follow all of these sources by scanning in the QR codes, if you wish. And there, further written sources and other audio and video sources are provided. First then, the question of marginalization. What does it mean to be marginalized? Well, as it turns out, one of the big legacies of colonialism is the marginalization of the human population.
One of the big legacies of colonialism, and nobody really focuses on it, is what might be called the marginalization of the human population.
What do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean is not that we've become less important.
Right.
We're not being marginalized in that sense. But on every continent, in every culture, in every language, humans are moving from the center of continents to the margins of continents.
And now to the...
We are now the marginalized species.
I see what you mean by marginalized.
Yes.
But that leads to what I think you're very concerned about now, which is the sustainability of what we're doing.
Wow, yeah, that's crucial. And that's one of the biggest legacies of colonialism. And again, it's not French colonialism, British colonialism, Portuguese or Dutch, whatever. They all started off, basically, since 1492, as maritime empires.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. So like the attraction was there in the coastal cities.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, coastal cities get organized around maritime trade. So whether it's New York or it's Dakar or it's Abidjan or Lagos or whatever, and in fact, in particular in Africa, every single capital city is arranged initially as part of the entrepot of the slave trade. So one of the biggest legacies of the slave trade is the marginalization from the continent, the movement toward the coast, the margins. Yes. And in this sense, this is why I've in the current moment, looked at climate change in a big way, because the one universal, again, that humans are going to have to face, whether we like it or not, or what your politics are, nothing related to what you intend, sea level is rising.
Exactly.
It can't be a recipe for stability when the entire human population is moving to the edge of continents and sea levels rising.
So do we know, I mean, of the is it about 9 billion, 30? I never remember now the total population.
Well, we're about 7.5 now, and where they project to about 9 or 10 billion.
Right.
But
so
it may be cut short a lot before that.
Well, now this is going to be a big question, which we're going to deal with in this talk. But what fraction of the population actually lives on the coasts now? Do we know that?
Yes, it's above 60, and it's going towards about 65 to 70% by the year 2050. They expect that the trends will continue until then. They may well be reversed by the kinds of typhoons that have been hitting China or the hurricanes that have been hitting the Caribbean and the like. In other words, it's not yet clear that we have an organized response to extreme weather events, let alone sea level rise. But we're beginning to experience the phenomena that would suggest we should respond to it, right? But there was a headline in the New York Times yesterday saying, listen, not only has Miami experienced this calamitous hurricane, but the investments have gone up in building downtown real estate. Indeed, yes. So the financial incentive for turning over real estate in vulnerable places is high. Same is happening in Lagos. Lagos is already at sea level and disappearing fast, but people are pouring money into high-rise buildings in Lagos. And they're saying, oh, well, we can put the electricals on the second floor. Well, that's fine. But what if the tens of millions of people who are going to be moving around in boats, you know?
Yes, indeed, yes.
Anyway, that's part of the focus that I've had on macro questions about colonialism. In other words, I'm interested not just in the micro question of which country did what to which ethnic group or which particular general did what, which I traced in detail in the French archives. But I'm much more interested in these macro questions, one of which is this marginalization. But beyond that, there's a huge one in terms of the reorganization of energy that happened on the Earth's surface because of colonial rule.
The marginalization of Africa refers then to the movement of its population toward the margins of the continent. This marginalization takes place both in Africa and in fact throughout the world. It's happening on every continent, in every language, every cultural tradition. People are moving from the center of continents to their margins. This has involved a large-scale and long-term shift in the distribution of Africa's population. That is what is meant by l'histoire de la longue durée. What then are the Annales school, as they're referred to in the French tradition? Well, it can be summed up pretty quickly. The Annales school is a group of historians associated with a style of historiography developed by the French in the 20th century to stress long-term social history. It's named after the scholarly journal Annales d'histoire économique et sociale, which remains the main source of scholarship, along with many books and monographs. In effect, we're going to focus on that. It's a style of historiography, that is, an approach to history, developed by French historians to stress long-term social history. One of its foremost practitioners, advocates, and model historians was a man named Fernand Braudel. He's been considered one of the greatest of the modern historians who emphasized the role of large-scale socioeconomic factors in the making and writing of history. Throughout his career, Braudel shows a revolutionary change of focus away from events and personalities towards trends and long-term transformations of social structures. One of his major early contributions was the history of the Mediterranean in the time of Charles II, where he amassed an amazing amount of material and evidence about the change in the whole of the Mediterranean structure. In this way, we're going to approach West African material. New evidence from old sources is available now with this new kind of historiography. African historical cartography can help us learn about the past and the possibilities for the future. It's very revealing, especially if we combine it with the insights of people from many different traditions, cultures, and countries. The Africa Map Circle is a group that has started to do this by exchanging digitized versions of maps across national boundaries in such a way that whole groups of people can begin to focus on them. Let's take a look at what they do, the Africa Map Circle, because they're beginning to reveal new insights from old sources.
Take a look, for example, at what is being undertaken in the Africa Map Circle, a group of people internationally that have gotten together to share this kind of information and share their analyses of these maps. They're inspired in part by the work of Prosser Gifford, a professor of African history for a long time. He died recently in 2020, but he taught that our understanding of African history, in fact, all history, is shaped by two principal factors. First, the nature of the data we have available to interpret and discuss, and second, the range of people and perspectives who are included in the circle to discuss it, discuss the maps, discuss the documents, and the like. That's crucial. First, the nature of the data. Second, the range of people and perspectives who are included in the circle, as he called it, in the circle to discuss it. That's a key concept. Who's in the circle? Well, the Africa Map Circle is trying to expand the circle beyond those who had access to rare book libraries or map collections
of a specialized type to a much broader range of historians, scholars, students, and the general public. The Africa Map Circle seeks to be inclusive, whereas previous collections were by intention exclusive in the sense that you needed to preserve these maps, and that meant that they were kept from the public largely and only displayed in certain occasions and under very controlled conditions. But what is the circle? Well, let's take a look at it. The Africa Map Circle is a very interesting new intellectual enterprise because you could argue that the African continent was arguably the first one in the world to be mapped in its full outline. It was circumnavigated long before the Americas, or for Australia, for example, or certainly for Asia and large parts of the Russian north, the Siberian plains. But Africa maps were made largely and created by non-Africans. Now, this is an interesting anomaly. The first continent, you could call it that, to be fully encircled and mapped, but mapped by those who weren't from the continent by and large. Therefore, Africa maps can only be understood as multicultural documents from the beginning. What are the early maps? Well, in many cases, they're transcriptions of places and names for places that were used in the local language. In other cases, they're names applied from European traditions. But which European tradition? Well, it depends upon the European group making the map. So there's a hodgepodge of different names, sometimes referring to places, sometimes referring to kingdoms, sometimes referring to names of peoples or associations of peoples or federations of tribes. Other times referring to rather mundane things like salt pans and hard rock. These maps are multicultural to begin with, and they require international and multicultural teams of students and scholars to be analyzed adequately. They can't be understood from only one linguistic tradition, for example, nor can they be fully understood if we don't understand what a place name means in the local language. Digital technology now makes it possible to share and analyze these maps around the globe. This is what's new. The maps are old, but the technology is allowing us to do new things with them. The result is that the collaborative study of African maps can now provide a new paradigm for international and multicultural teaching and learning. This is very important because the techniques devised here are not just exclusive to Africa. They can be applied to any part of the globe with any linguistic tradition. The study of Chinese maps, for example, could be undertaken in the same way that we're studying now maps in the Africa Map Circle. Study of Arabic maps of Africa, could be included in the same kind of scope, and with great results.
New evidence from old sources then helps us to realize about the past and the possible future, or what's not possible as well. With digital technology and electronic exchange, old maps from the slave trade era have a striking new relevance. Maps like this can be studied in detail. We can look at this portion of the African coast at 600 dots per inch now, much closer than you could get if you saw the map in a collection or in a display case. It can be analyzed down to the letter of every one of the individual entries for a place name or river name or an indication of an island. And that's the kind of analysis that's now possible. The sources are old, in the sense the maps themselves are old, but we've got a new form of analyzing them. Take, for example, the ability to zoom in to different parts of this kind of map. And it's as if we're parachuting into a much deeper level of reality. We can learn about things like, for example, the Cape of Lagos here and the Channel of Lagos outlined here, and becomes very relevant to what we're beginning to look at on the west coast of Africa. Similarly, we can look at the importance of different areas like the Kingdom of Benin and its influence at the time. Even the ancient town of Benin is indicated on this map. It was more than a town. It was a huge center, as was discovered later on and in fact destroyed by the British in a military raid of 1897 at the end of the 19th century. But this is 150 years before that, and these maps record what existed at the time. They also record what's not known, and this is very important. If you look at these maps in detail, you can see that not much is known about the depth of the rivers from the coast. We may think we know Lagos in the modern era with somewhat of the canoes that are reminiscent of the earlier period, but it's about to be transformed enormously by new kinds of technology and, in fact, new creation of land. Despite what the old maps tell us and warn us about in some respects, Lagos has launched a multi-billion-dollar effort to defy the sea, to build structures out into the ocean at this point. Really quite staggering effort. It's not at all clear it'll be successful, but they are certainly ambitious, these new efforts. New land being created in the middle of the ocean. Not quite the middle, from the edge, and that's the tricky part. Because the edge is unstable itself. It is sinking, as in most cases with deltas of rivers. They are slowly subsiding. Yet you can get access to these breathless descriptions of the future of Lagos on almost any channel these days, especially on YouTube. It's available. The engineers and the government promoters, as well as the financial backers, are very anxious to sell the idea to you. And we can take a look at some of these. They're really quite extraordinary. Let's look, for example, at this one that's entitled Lagos, Africa's Model Megacity. It's built on the idea of being able to, as they call it, reclaim land by pumping sediment onto a backed up dike here that will keep the ocean outside it. You can see the logic here. The ocean can come up this far but no further. And on the inside of that, they can create land upon which to build through pumping it out of the lagoons onto a kind of enlarged sandbank that becomes the source and object of the new construction site. They call it reclaiming land from the sea. Well, to some extent that's true, because this is all land that has been eroded away since the early maps of the slave trade period. In that sense, it's reclaimed, but it's been under the ocean for quite a while, and it's going to return there. If you ask any geologist about that, there's not much doubt that sea level rise is going to overwhelm this particular little barrier and leave Lagos awash in a new level of sea level rise that they won't be able to protect against. In a sense, their strategy is wrong, because they're building walls like this against a storm surge. But storm surges are not the same as sea level rise. And no matter how elaborate they draw their maps and add on to existing land and settlement areas, they're not going to be able to resist the inevitable rise of the oceans. Can't happen, won't happen. Impressive as it is so far, they've created quite a bit of it. It's not going to be sustainable in the coming futures, let alone any of the buildings that they project as a place to live and work, springing out of this sand sediment that's been pumped up to support the illusion of a full functioning city on the other side. This could perhaps be done if sea level were staying stable, but the one thing we know is that not only won't it be stable, but it will in exponential terms get higher and higher and higher as the melting of the Arctic and Antarctic glaciers now makes it inevitable that sea level rise is going to be baked in for generations to come.
Lagos, the heartbeat of West Africa. Teeming with life and energy, where the old inspires and shapes the new. Capital of Africa's music and film industries. Glittering skyscrapers sit alongside bustling markets, buzzing nightclubs, and secluded sandy beaches. A place where entire new districts are rising from the sea, where natural resources, economic stability, and forward-thinking leadership combine. Since 2007, Lagos has transformed itself from a sprawling urban melting pot into a must-visit destination for investors and visitors from across the globe. Ideally located on Nigeria's Atlantic coast, Lagos is finally making the most of its potential as a national and international trade hub. Governor Fashola has continued the work of his predecessor, Governor Tinubu. So what has changed during his 8 years in office?
The most remodeling has been the people. They have come to believe that everything is possible, and with that mindset, things are beginning to happen.
Lagos is a city that dreams big. Where other cities might be confined by space or limited ambition, the development of Lagos has taken off since 2007. New roads, highways and bridges have put transport at the forefront of the infrastructure investment that now sees Lagos transforming itself into a model megacity. One such ambitious project is Echo Atlantic City, a fully privately funded multi-billion-dollar vision of the African future, which is spearheaded by a groundbreaking idea to reclaim land thought lost to the sea, transforming it into a futuristic new waterfront city.
The fulfillment of the dreams and aspirations of many Nigerians. To have a city that's bright, vibrant, 21st century within the heart of Nigeria.
The epicenter of this new vision will be a financial hub for Nigeria and the whole of West Africa that will put Eco Atlantic on a par with the world's most established financial centers. The impressive and sweeping Eco Boulevard aims to become Lagos's answer to Fifth Avenue, New York, and house financial institutions alongside the major oil and gas companies and insurance houses. This new hub will be set within a galaxy of new residential and commercial neighborhoods, iconic buildings, and 21st century leisure and retail spaces, all supplied by state-of-the-art, purpose-built infrastructure. Set like a jewel at the heart of Eco Atlantic will be the Eco Pearl, a 5-tower residential complex rising majestically out of the virgin soil to gaze out across the Atlantic Ocean.
Tower 1 have been sold already completely, which is 84 luxury apartment. Tower B, 35% have been sold.
The towers offer 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom and penthouse-type apartments with sea and marina views. A true slice of luxury living. Nestled alongside Eco Atlantic and perfectly set up to provide access to this new city and to wider Lagos, the Eco Energy Estate is a 450,000 square metre expanse in a prime location for access to both the new opportunities of Eco Atlantic and the fast developing potential of mainland Lagos itself. Behind the Eco Energy Estate project is a name synonymous with high-end, future-facing development and infrastructure projects, Orlean Invest Africa. In 25 years at the forefront of Nigeria's economic advances, Orlean has been responsible for a wealth of extraordinary projects, including the world's biggest industrial free zone, the Oni Oil and Gas Free Zone.
We have actually over 3 decades now established ourselves as the leading logistics provider in sub-Saharan Africa.
As one of the world's most dynamic growth hotspots, it's only natural that Lagos is the city benefiting most from Orlean Invest's expertise. As well as the Eco Energy Estate, Orlean is a major partner in the Badagry Megaport and Lekki International Airport projects, working behind the scenes to deliver the new face of Lagos.
We're going to also be able to assist Lagos and Nigeria ultimately in creating wealth for the economy there, both local and international.
With the Orlean name and expertise behind it, combining secure, state-of-the-art facilities with an unparalleled location, Eco Energy Estate offers residents a chance to live tomorrow's lifestyle today.
Well, that was enthusiastic enough on the part of the government planners and those who are investing in it. But of course, the engineers and project managers who are making a profit on these things are enthusiastic about its prospects as well. And you can find their statements in their engineering literature. Literature is a bit of a stretch. Their engineering propaganda. They're trying to, in fact, encourage more countries around the world to build into the sea at the same time as sea level is rising. This is a doubtful proposition, but it's a very profitable one because people cramped up against the edges of continents are desperate for new kinds of space.
As an increasing majority of the global population choose to live in urban areas, many cities in emerging economies are quickly becoming new economic powerhouses on the world stage. With 13 million inhabitants, Lagos is the largest city in Nigeria, and despite overcrowding and continual erosion from the Atlantic, is expected to become the largest city in the world by 2100, when it will be home to over 88 million people. Despite its current challenges, the state of Lagos and the Nigerian government are working to elevate the city to become the economic centre of West Africa and the financial heart of the entire African continent. In order to provide Lagos with the space it requires to become such a prominent financial centre, a vast area of land is now being reclaimed from the Atlantic Ocean, turning back more than 100 years of coastal erosion and creating a multi-district addition to the already extensive city. Funded by a consortium headed by South Energy X Nigeria Limited and developed in conjunction with the Nigerian government, the vast Eco-Atlantic scheme will reclaim 10 square kilometres of land from the Atlantic Ocean and extend the coastline more than 2 kilometres offshore. 10 new city districts will then be constructed on this reclaimed land, providing commercial, residential and recreational amenities and homes to more than 250,000 residents. In addition, some 150,000 commuters will be expected to visit Eco-Atlantic every day. Centred around Echo Boulevard, a 2-kilometre-long main route that is intended to become the equivalent of New York's Fifth Avenue or Paris's Champs-Élysées, this new city aims to become the global gateway into Africa, with its own independent power, water, fibre optics and drainage systems that seek to provide world-class infrastructure to its occupants. While several significant land reclamation projects have been undertaken across the world, in locations such as Dubai, Hong Kong and Monaco, many of these schemes have been constructed in the relatively calm waters of the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean Sea. However, with Lagos's position on the ocean, the land reclaimed to create Eco-Atlantic needed to be engineered to withstand the extremes of nature. In order to construct this extensive new area of land and ensure that it remains in place, even in the face of a 1 in 1,000 year storm, engineers are constructing what has become dubbed the Great Wall of Lagos. This wall consists of an 8-kilometre long, 45-metre wide structure that rises 18 metres from the ocean floor to protect the newly reclaimed land and re-established Lagos coastline. Designed to the highest marine standards, the wall is made up of 12 layers of rock and concrete, giving it the ability to withstand an extreme, once-in-a-millennium storm event. Consisting primarily of various grades of rock, the real strength of the wall comes from more than 100,000 X-shaped concrete blocks, which form its visible top layer. These concrete blocks weigh 5 tons each and are moulded using a special concrete mix that eliminates the need for steel reinforcement, which could degrade over time in the oceanic environment. Using GPS trackers, each block is placed precisely along an X, Y and Z axis, allowing them to interlock with one another and create a unified structure capable of withstanding and disrupting the strongest Atlantic waves. While the Great Wall has been praised for restoring the coastline and protecting the low-lying Victoria Island from flooding and erosion, critics of the project claim that the new land has led to storm surges being redirected either side of the development and into unprotected areas of Lagos. Rising 8 metres above the waves, the wall creates a lagoon which is then filled with sand from the ocean floor, creating new usable land for developers to construct Eco-Atlantic. While works first commenced in 2008, it was not until 2013 that enough land had been reclaimed to enable infrastructure and building construction to begin. With canals, roads and bridges under construction, in 2016, Echo Black Pearl became the first residential tower to open, marking a major milestone for the project. Since then, the tower has been joined by the Echo White Pearl and a number of other structures across the area. With 6.5 square kilometres of land already reclaimed from the ocean, the project is now over 50% complete. And with critical infrastructure in place, developers will soon be opening the newly created region to further foreign investment. Despite receiving strong support from the Nigerian government, some have criticised the project, saying it will increase inequality between those in Echo Atlantic and others in the wider city of Lagos. However, with projects like the Lagos Metro and the Lagos-Kano Railway already raising the standard of living across the country, the increased investment that Echo Atlantic will bring to Nigeria is likely to allow further projects to be undertaken well into the future.
This then is the enthusiasm you've heard. But let's take a look at some of the other issues that are coming in to become more and more pronounced and apparent to the public at large. Lagos and coastal cities are threatened by the forecast rise in sea level. This was an article in The Guardian in Nigeria, the Guardian paper in Nigeria itself. Furthermore, you can pick up on YouTube various broadcasts posted as well on transition studies, and you can look them up by their title. Just type in the title that you see up here in the search engine, former tourist haven in Lagos threatened by rising sea levels, and you'll be taken right to the page you can click on and hear the story in detail. Or a question like this: Lagos is sinking, a short documentary. It's sinking because all of the coastal regions that are estuaries to rivers on continents tend to subside, that is, sink over time. Lagos battles against rising sea levels. This is a documentary by Deutsche Welle, the German broadcasting firm. And it'll give you a sense of some of the problems. Because even if they can manage to maintain this as a livable space, the water doesn't go away. It gets displaced towards other coastal regions, shall we say, to the west and to the east of this. And other villages and towns are wiped out because of the change in the coastal morphology of this whole region. This is a geologic structure, could be called geoengineering on a massive scale, creating cities in the sea. It's going to have implications, but not foreseeable ones.
This giant stone wall on the coast will be 8 kilometers long when it's finished. It's an important part of the Eco Atlantic City development project on the shores of Lagos. It's designed to protect the new resort area. The wall's construction is about half finished. David Frame is the project manager. He says it'll take more than 100,000 cement blocks to finish it.
Now these units weigh 5 tons each, and the shape is designed so that they lock together, so they work in unison rather than individual units. And that creates a very formidable defense against the aggressive wave action.
100 years ago, there was no development here. But due to the rising sea level, the beaches have been disappearing and are now being restored. Most of the property lots here have already been sold. The Victoria Island District, the city's main business and financial centre, is located right next door to the project. It used to be surrounded by water and swamps, so the Eco-Atlantic City development will benefit Victoria Island as well.
We are reclaiming this land, protecting Victoria Island, but in addition to that, we're creating the necessary expansion so the commercial activity and the expansion of residential accommodation within Lagos can be achieved to a very high level.
When the project is completed, Eco-Atlantic City will be home to about 250,000 people. Another 150,000 will commute to and from work here. It's a multi-billion-dollar project financed by private investors and the Nigerian government. Lagos is already one of the world's most expensive cities, and only the truly wealthy will be able to afford to live in Eco-Atlantic City. There will be none of the heavy traffic or overcrowded housing projects found in other parts of the city. For generations, Soni Alakija's family has lived in a poor district near the coast, not far from the new construction site.
There used to be a lot of houses around here. A street used to run over there where the water is. The ocean just kept rising and rising.
The people who live here can't afford a wall to protect them. So during big storms, the water comes in and swallows up more and more of the land. And local residents say that all the construction just down the road has made the situation worse. Marine ecologist Ako Amadi says this coastal area is under threat. He adds that the Atlantic City project may have contributed to coastal erosion.
We make observations, but we don't find the causes of the observations which we're making. So the erosion has become so progressive, nobody has been measuring it in research, and this is a problem that we have here, that we should have had a lot of cumulative research to actually show the progression of what is happening. What we are seeing is that every year the people who live in these areas have had to move backwards. Property has been destroyed, and there is actually no solution to it right now.
David Frame says coastal erosion is a serious problem in Nigeria, but denies that his project is making it worse.
The entire coastline of Nigeria is undergoing quite serious erosion, and it's something that needs to be addressed. What we're doing in Eco-Atlantic, in our small part, we are protecting the commercial area and the existing conurbation of Lagos, but we cannot protect the entire Lekki Peninsula.
Some experts predict that the sea level could rise here by 1 meter. The question remains, how will Lagos meet this challenge?
Other coastal zones near Lagos are similarly vulnerable to sea level rise in the coming decades. Take this example from what used to be known as Ouida, or the area known as Dahomey during the colonial period, now known as the country of Benin. The slave trade maps from this area make it clear that there are different lagoons on the inside of the ocean. A whole series of ribboned lagoons very near sea level, which carry fresh water, but the Europeans, in effect, couldn't get their boats into those rivers because they're so shallow. They were, in effect, confined to anchoring outside the surf area and take small boats and then be accompanied and escorted by local African populations to the interior. They built forts in the interior, as you can see here, with the forts indicated as the French fort here, and an English fort, and a Portuguese fort. These were largely forts to store the slaves until the ships came and took them to the New World. The king's headquarters was up here at Xavier, or as it became known as Sabi. Now, all of this had an intricate system of waterways which are going to be overwhelmed by rising sea levels. And it's part of the instruction of these old maps to indicate very clearly where these rivers used to be, because all of them are going to change their course over time. And what used to look like strong forts are going to be eroded away at their base, and the walls will eventually fall over. You can see the structure here of the European trade. There were tents constructed on the coast. Les tentes des Européens were indicated here, both in Dutch, by the way, and in French. These maps used to serve across several different traditions. And then they had fortified areas here that were built out of stone and mud. And as I say, they then got close to the king's headquarters in Xavier, or Sabi, as it was referred to. All of this, though, is likely to be inundated fairly quickly, certainly in extreme weather events, as are beginning to happen. People are caught by surprise so far with the evidence of sea level rise, but the country is now known as Benin, and Benin is said to be battling the rising seas. And severe weather is part of the climate change mix, so that they get overwhelming floods on the north side of the coast, bringing water down to the edge of the continent at the same time sea level is rising. And every few years, they are hit by the combination of the two, devastating their agriculture. These then are some of the insights we get in African history, looking at it from the Annales school's point of view and l'histoire de la longue durée. If we take that all up and down the African coast, we can see that the fate and future of a marginalized continent is very precarious. More and more people are moving to the margins of the continent just as sea level is rising and extreme weather events are becoming more pronounced. Scan in the QR codes, keep in touch with this kind of information, and launch your own effort to help out, either in research or in assistance to these populations. We're going to be measured in the tens of millions of people during the lifetimes of those in college today. Thank you very much.